Alright, what's up, guys? Commish Acecoach704 here. I'm very tired and had a really good weekend. Getaway with my lovely fiance to middle of nowhere, South Carolina. But that's another story. This week's PEL Storylines, we are focused on playoffs. Playoff scenarios, who's in, who's out, who still has a chance. And in some cases things are crystal clear, and then in some cases it's about as murky as mud. So we're gonna jump right into it. AFC's a lot more clear than the NFC, so I'm gonna start with the AFC first. We'll go through divisions. AFC North. The Steelers have clinched the AFC North, and they'll also have a bye in the playoffs. Browns have clinched a playoff spot as a wild card. They'll be a number 5 seed. For the first round. AFC South, the Jags have clinched the division. They'll be a 3 or 4 seed depending on who wins the other divisions here. AFC East, of course, is still up for grabs with a de facto division championship game next week in Miami between myself and the Dolphins, but both of these teams are in the playoffs. So playing for division championship and a number 3 or 4 seed depending on what happens. We'll get into that in a minute. AFC West, the Chargers have clinched the division. They'll have a bye in the first round of the playoffs and home field in their divisional playoff game. The Raiders are eliminated at 8-6. They were the last team to have a chance at a wild card. They're eliminated because as we break down the conference standings, they would have to win out and then win a tiebreaker against the Dolphins, which they lose a head-to-head. They lose a head-to-head. Well, they can't be tied with the Bills. The Jags are division champs, so beat them and the Dolphins would be the only two options for them to have a chance. And because the Dolphins won a head-to-head against the Raiders are out of it. So good luck, and we'll see you next year in that respect. All right, so the 6 AFC playoff teams are the Steelers, Chargers, Browns, Jags, Bills, and Dolphins. So the way this breaks down is the Steelers at 14-1. Well, most looking at AFC conference wins about the same. If it comes down to tiebreakers, I don't think. Well, I know the Steelers and the Chargers have not played head-to-head, and they could end up with the same amount of conference wins. So when it gets that deep, I'm not too sure how it's going to play out. But maybe win percentage. And right now, well, it could end up in a tie there too. So I don't know. We'll roll the dice and see. But the Steelers and Chargers will have both home divisional playoff games in the second round of the playoffs. Like I said, the Browns are locked in as the 5 seed, first wild card in the playoffs. They will play the number 4 seed, which will be either the Jaguars or the Dolphins or the Bills. The Jaguars are right now at 10-4. They've got a pending game against the 49ers, which will be tough. And then their Week 17 game is against the Titans. So if you assume they're at least 11-5, the Bills and Dolphins, a couple different scenarios here. The Jags are 11-5. Bills end up 11-5. Between those two, in that scenario, the top break would go to the Jags in that scenario because they'll have more conference wins than the Bills would. They would have 10 and the Bills would have 9. So that would give Jags the 3 seed and give Bills the 4 seed. A lot of it depends on the Jaguars' final record, and I'm assuming a split, worst case scenario. I don't see them losing both games. So if you say they're 11-5, and then the Dolphins end up winning, that puts them at 11-4-1. In that scenario, the Dolphins, the tie works as basically a half game. So in that scenario, the Dolphins would be the 3, the Jags would be the 4, and then the Bills would be the 6. So you can see how this gets confusing. Because there's a number of scenarios that can happen here still this late in the season. But the most important thing is you know who the playoff teams are. And if certain teams win, we know what their seeds could be. All right, so week 17, a lot of seeding taking place in the AFC in terms of 3, 4, and 6 are between the Jags, Bills, and Dolphins. The Jags are at worst of 4, at best of 3. The Bills can go from anywhere between 3 and 6, and the Dolphins about the same, depending on win or loss. All right. Okay, so let's jump to the NFC. We'll run through those divisions. NFC North, Vikings 12-3, Lions 10-4. They split on the regular season. If the Lions win out, they would need the Vikings still to lose, so it's in the Vikings' hands to win it. When you look at divisional records, they're similar, 4-1 each. I think they both have one divisional game left. Still a lot of assuming to do here, but you can assume the Vikings win it because of their lead right now, and that would give them a good shot at a possible bye here. Let's go through the rest of them. NFC South is still wide open. Saints on top right now, 8-6. Bucks 7-7. Falcons 6-8. You know, I've seen crazier things happen. All 3 teams still have a shot here, but I don't know, man. The Saints have that 1-game lead right now. They've been getting lucky. They're running into some teams that haven't played or aren't around right now, so they're getting a couple of forces to kind of push them ahead. But you know, I think they still have games left where it's going to be settled on the field. The Falcons and the Saints are supposed to play. I know that much from this week. And let me look. The Bucks are supposed to play the Panthers, but the Panthers are out of it, so you can assume a Bucks win. If they play, it could be a sim. So we'll see what happens there. But they're not in any kind of contention for a bye. NFC East, the Giants won tonight. I think that was a comeback victory over the Cardinals to put them at 10-5. They're in a really good spot to win the division. Both the Redskins and Cowboys are collapsing down the stretch. They both lost 3 games in a row. You can assume the Giants win the division here, and that would give them at least probably the number 3 seed, looking at things here. In the NFC West, the Seahawks won tonight over the Cowboys, puts them to 14-1. They're going to have home field advantage throughout the playoffs, and the number 1 seed out of the NFC. 49ers at 10-4. Pretty good shot at a wild card here. Let's take a look at the division or conference standings, I should say. So right now, the Seahawks and the Vikings look good as the number 1 and number 2 seeds. Would have home field advantage in the second round divisional playoff games. Lions would be a wild card. 49ers would be a wild card. Giants would be the 3. Saints would be the 4. If you look at wild card standings, it's pretty much locked up. The Cardinals' loss tonight hurts them a lot, puts them at 8-7, and you know, I don't see a way they get in with the Lions and 49ers being, 10-4 each. The best they can do now is 9-7, and that's not going to get in. So all the other teams have been eliminated in that scenario. The only people that are in it with a record below 8-6 are in the NFC South, and they're playing for the division, and that would include the Falcons and the Buccaneers. All right. So these teams are still in it. Seahawks, Vikings, Lions, 49ers, Giants, Saints, Falcons, and Buccaneers. All right. So the Saints, Falcons, and Buccaneers are all playing essentially for one spot because that's the winner of the division. Your top 2 seeds are the Seahawks and Vikings. Lions and 49ers are the wild cards. Giants looks like they're going to be the number 3 seed, and the winner of the NFC South between Saints, Bucks, and Falcons will be the number 4 seed. Now, between the Lions and the 49ers, where would they be seated at? I don't know if they've played head-to-head this year, but the Lions have a 2-game lead in terms of NFC conference wins. So the Lions would most likely be the 5, playing the winner of the NFC South in the first round, and then the 49ers would be the 6, playing the Giants most likely in the first round. Excuse me. Not professional. So those are your playoff scenarios. And, you know, when you look at Week 17, let's take a look at some important games that you need to watch. Well, first of all, games that haven't been played this week that would have playoff impact. Just mentioned Tampa Bay, Carolina. Atlanta, New Orleans is a huge game. Falcons lose that, it's over for them. Jacksonville, San Francisco is a huge game in both conferences. Detroit, Cincinnati. We know Cincinnati will probably lose that one, unfortunately. It's been a tough season for them. And that's about it. Everyone else is not too big of an impact in terms of playoffs. All right, so you know where you're at in terms of what you need to do. Week 17, let's take a look at some important games here. We've got Panthers, Falcons. If the Falcons win this week, that would be important. Packers, Lions, of course, that's important for the Lions. Bills, Dolphins, of course, it's the AFC's championship game. Vikings, Bears. Bears have been playing spoiler. That is not going to be an easy game for the Vikings. Redskins, Giants, just kind of for seeding in the NFC. Browns, Steelers is a huge one. Not as terms of impact, but 2 very good teams getting ready for the playoffs. Saints, Buccaneers, wow. That could be for the NFC South division. So we could have 2 2 divisional championship games in Week 17. Jaguars, Titans, for seeding is important for the Jags. And that's pretty much it in terms of importance. Well, 49ers, Rams would have some impact on seeding also in the NFC. All right, so that's your playoff picture, and that's the storyline that's going on. You know, you look at the 2 division championship games. Myself and the Dolphins, you know, we had a tough game last time we played from the Bills standpoint. We uncharacteristically gave up 2 big plays in the fourth quarter. We try to play defense, not to give up big plays, you know, in that scenario. But, you know, guys just went silly and didn't do what they're supposed to do. Of course, it's Madden, so, you know, those kind of things happen. And then with the Saints-Bucks game, it's hard to say, you know. I haven't seen Blake enough to know if he can, you know, beat the Saints, or even if they're going to play. You know, it's been one of those weird seasons in the NFC South. I don't know what's going on. But anyways, it could be an important game. So make sure you guys understand Week 17 in the PEL is always a 24-hour advance, okay? And the reason for that is we have a lot of teams that are out of it, and either they don't want to play or, you know, they're just ready to get to the offseason. So we speed the process up starting in Week 17. Now, very important that you understand also, playoffs are 24-hour advances in the PEL. Why? Because we have less teams playing. And, you know, we want to move things along because everyone's ready to get to the offseason, if you're not in the playoffs especially. So make sure of that when we advance to week number 1 to Week 17, the alert goes out. Make sure you contact your opponents in a timely fashion because we stick to that 24 hours. Unless it's a super important game, I'm not going to hold the advance, okay? And by super important, I mean whether you're going to be in or out of the playoffs. And to be honest with you, the way we just broke it down, the playoff teams are pretty much settled with the exception of the NFC South. So, a lot of these games we're not going to hold advance for. So let's reach out to opponents, contact them. If they want to play, great. If they don't, then we'll settle it, the best way we can. If you want to give a force or a sim or whatever it may be. All right. We just really want to keep things moving along. So on the live show Tuesday, we're going to talk about the off-season schedule, which I like to get out there in advance so people can prepare and be available for the off-season. The first off-season of the CFM is very important. Kind of shapes what your team's going to look like, or could shape what your team's going to look like for most of this Madden cycle. So we're going to talk about that, and we're going to talk about the things we're going to do in the off-season, which we mentioned before when we talked about features of the league, the draft roundtable that the commissions will do. And probably what we're going to do is I'll set up some type of conference call, and then I'll film it. It'll be hard to do live. It won't sound as good live, I don't think. We may try to do it live, but I'll see if the sound picks up well through Ustream. We can, just do it live and kind of preview it that way. But that we'll be talk about that. We'll talk about how we do free agency, how we do the draft itself, because it is, it's a little, not really a little, it's a little different than some leagues, but I think most leagues are pretty much across the board on it. But we'll get into those particulars on the live show this week, and then I'll have the offseason schedule ready to go, and then we'll get into playoff stuff. We'll get into awards, who's leading the award situation, because those should be almost settled. People can have a big game in week 17 to kind of sway it a little bit. But I'm going to tell you right now, if I see you stat padding, we're going to have a problem. All right? I don't want nobody stat padding in here. Then we'll go over the league awards, the plus attribute that you get if you win a league award. All those end of season type things we'll talk about on the live show Tuesday, okay? I want to keep everybody involved. Tonight's storylines was strictly about playoffs because I wanted to get it out the way, so we can focus on everyone on the live show on Tuesday night. Could be a long one, okay? So we got a lot to talk about. Hopefully everybody can make it. 10 p.m. Eastern time is when we plan to start. Last week I know we had some games going on at the same time. Hopefully this week we'll have a little, not that I want less activity, but I do want everyone to hear the live show live. I think it's a lot better that way. And that way it's interactive. You can ask questions in the chat and you get an answer right then and there. And, we'll have a good time. All right, so that's this week's PEL Storylines. Thanks for watching. We'll get back to the fun next week. Thanks.